Hi, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. Well, normally I start off the video each week with me playing through a composition, and then I explain what it was that we just played and we break it all down. But this week I wanted to start off a little different. I wanted a different setup for the intro. And so this week we're going to be taking a look at the CAGED system, C-A-G-E-D. And this is my version of CAGED. So this is kind of a unique way of looking at the CAGED system. And if you've tried understanding it in the past and been frustrated, maybe you've never even heard of it, or maybe you've been using it for years. It doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum. There's going to be practical, useful information in this. There is a composition, so we still have a composition at the end of this. In fact, there's 3 of them that you're going to be playing along with, a lot of practice materials. And that's where I think a lot of other lessons on CAGED fall short. There's some great explanation as to what it is, but then when it comes to practical use, you're sort of left on your own. So this is designed to help you understand it, but then also have something that you can start practicing it with right away, so that it really starts to cement and you use this when you improvise. That's my goal for you. So don't worry if you've never heard of CAGED. We're going to break it all down over these videos. And I've got this in 3 levels. So in level 1, we're going to be learning how to play a single chord all over the neck. And there's a jam track that corresponds with that. So you'll be playing along with a jam track that is set over a single chord. Level 2, you'll be playing over 3 chords. It'll be a 1-4-5 chord progression, but you'll be playing them all over the neck. And then at level 3, you're going to be playing that same 1-4-5 chord progression, but you're going to be adding some fill licks in between. It sounds like this. Alright, so what's really cool about the way we're going to learn this is you do not need to have all of the notes memorized all over the neck. I think a lot of people make that mistake. They first think before they can play all over the neck, they have to memorize all the note names. And I don't think that's a smart way to start, because one, it's very overwhelming to try and do that. It's a big task. But then secondly, it's not very practical. You're left with all this information and you don't know what to do with it. So just because you can play every A note all over the neck, you go to your first jam session or you try and play along with somebody, and you don't know how to use that information. So that's something I think that happens later. So what we're going to learn is a very practical way of playing all over the neck, and it starts with just knowing 5 chords. As long as you know your C chord, your A chord, G, E, and D, you know how to play them and you know them by name, you're going to be able to play any major chord in any position on the neck. It's a very cool way of learning how to play all over the neck. So we're going to start off with the C chord. And I'm going to assume you know how to make these chords, these first position chords. But if you look at a C chord and you look at the 3rd fret 5th string, our ring finger, this is going to be our connection point. And so every one of these chords are going to connect one to the next. Now I'm going to call out the connection point, the little anchor points. It's kind of like Legos. Once you see them all together, they're all stacked together in this nice little order for every one of those chords in first position. But anyway, we're going to start with this one. If I replace my ring finger with my index finger, and then I use my pinky, some people may use their ring finger for this, but I'm going to bar the first 4 strings on the 5th fret. And I'm going to play the middle 4 strings, 5, 4, 3, and 2. That is also a C chord. So we have a C chord and a C chord. Now this chord is using the A chord shape. So this is where some people get confused with CAGED. They think that's an A chord. It's not an A chord. It's a C chord using the A chord shape. What do I mean by that? Well, those 5 chords I was just showing you, C, A, G. If we look at the A, look how I'm playing that. I'm barring the first 4 strings. You see the similarity? But I'm playing it down here, and obviously on the 2nd fret. But where my index finger would be, there's the nut on that 5th string. So that's your A chord. If I were to slide it up 1 fret, now I'm replacing the nut where the nut was with my index finger. That's an A sharp, but it's using that A chord shape. So that's what we mean by CAGED. It's those chord shapes. So that's going to always be referred to as our A chord shape. So there's your A sharp, there's your B, and there's your C. And we could keep going up the neck. But now we've got a C using the C chord shape and a C using the A chord shape. So we've spelled C-A out of CAGED. Now, the way that I look at this A chord shape is there's actually another one in here. There's this. I call this the top part of the A. That's kind of a goofy name for it, but that's really what it is. It's the top part of that A chord. It's a little triad here. So I've got my middle finger and my ring finger on the 5th fret, strings 2 and 3. And look, they're just replacing where my pinky was already. And then my index finger comes up here to the 3rd fret, 1st string. Now the reason I split this into 2 parts, so I've got the bottom part and the top part of the A, is I find it difficult to try and do this and play all 5 strings that way. That's how I see a lot of people explaining CAGED, and that's not a practical use of that chord. I don't really see many people making a chord that way. But I do see little triads like this all the time, and I see this chord shape all the time. So that's what I've done in my mind. I've just split it into 2. So we've got 3 steps now. You've got C, you've got your A, and then you've got the top part of your A. So now we move on to the G chord. Now if I were to try and simulate this nut here and slide everything up to this point, I'm playing a C chord using that G chord shape, but that really hurts my hand and it's very impractical. I don't see anybody using this chord shape. Technically that's right, that would be the G out of the CAGED system, but it's not useful. But here's what I do see. If I just look at this, I see this all the time. And then if I look at this, the top part of it, I see that all the time. So let's look at those 2. So we're going to look at playing a G chord shape as the bottom part of a G and the top part of a G. That's how I think of it. That's easy to play and it's very, very useful. So let's first look at our connection point from the last chord. So we were playing on that A chord shape. Look at where that bar is. If I replace that bar with my index finger, and then I put my ring finger up here on the 7th fret, 5th string, play strings 5, 4, 3, and 2 again. Look at that, I'm playing a C chord and a C chord up here. Now I look at that as the G chord shape, because really, if I were to play those strings out of a G chord, that's what I'm doing. I'm just sliding it up here. So hopefully that makes sense for you. We're not playing a G chord, just using the G chord shape. So we have the bottom part, and then if you keep that bar there on the 5th fret, first 4 strings, and your pinky comes all the way up here to the 8th fret, 1st string, this chord is used all the time in the blues. And it's a great little chord because you can slide it anywhere. It's easy to play, and it's using 4 strings. So now, as a review, I have the C chord. I have the C chord using the A shape. I have the top part of the A shape, the bottom part of the G shape, the top part of the G shape. Now let's keep going. So we have C, A, G. What's the next one? We're going to go to the E shape. So where my pinky is up here on that 8th fret, 1st string, at that point I would put a bar down on that same fret. You can just feel your way up the neck. So as long as I can see where my pinky is, I can just bar there. And then I'm going to use these 3 fingers to make the E chord shape. This is just a major bar chord shape. That's a C chord as well. Now, sometimes, usually actually, when I'm playing live, I don't play all 6 strings. I think it's overkill. I usually just end up playing that little part of the chord. So it's 4 strings. So I bar the first 2 strings on the 8th fret with my index finger, and then my middle finger goes down on the 9th fret, 3rd string, ring finger goes down on the 10th fret, 4th string. I find that to be much easier to play, and nobody's ever faulted me for not playing all 6 strings. I think a lot of the extra strings in a guitar tend to be overkill. So now we have the E chord shape. So we have C, A, G, E. The only thing left is D. And the way that we're going to play that is, if you look at where these 2 fingers are, your ring finger and your pinky, we're going to put the bar there. So that's going to be on the 10th fret. And then I've got my pinky up here on the 13th fret, 2nd string. And my middle finger, my ring finger is on the 12th fret, 3rd string. We're going to play the middle 4 strings again. 5, 4, 3, and 2. And that's actually the bottom part of the D chord shape. Now let me explain. So some of you are saying, how's that a D chord shape? That doesn't look like a D chord. It actually is. You'll see what I mean. If I go down and play a D chord the way you know it, down in 1st position, I'm going to use some different fingers for this. And I'm not going to use that top string. I'm just going to play the bottom part of the D chord. It would look like that. Now if I were to slide that up a fret, obviously I'm going to have to bar here, or I'm going to have to use my finger as a capo on the 1st fret. So So I'm using that same chord shape and sliding it all the way up till we get up to this point. And that becomes a D chord shape. So that's the bottom part of the D chord. The top part is the part that we all know, that shape, that little triangle shape. It looks like a D chord. We're just playing it up here. So the middle finger and index finger are on the 12th fret, strings 1 and 3. And then ring finger's on the 13th fret, string 2. You're just going to play the top 3 strings, and that's the top part of the C chord. And look at this. It's the same thing, it's just an octave higher. I'm out of room here with this guitar, but you can see I'm already making the top part of this C chord that we have down here. But, you know, obviously the nut is playing where these 2 fingers would be. And so now the pattern just repeats. It would keep going if I had more frets. And that is really the CAGED system, and you can see how every one of those chords connects. And let me just do a quick review all the way through it now. So we have C chord shape, we have the A chord shape, we have the top part of the A, we have the bottom part of the G, we have the top part of the G, we have the E chord shape, we have the D chord shape, the bottom part of the D chord shape, and then we have the top part of the D. And you can see that I was able to play all the way up the neck without having to memorize any note names. All I did was start with that C chord. I just needed that first starting point. So now as a premium member, you have access to the tablature, which is a little cheat sheet that shows all those different chord voicings. But you also have access to an MP3 jam track that would be this level 1 for C. And I want you to try playing along with that. And let me show you, if you're not a premium member, let me show you what kind of the gist of what it sounds like. We're just going to take all those chord voicings and we're going to play them like this. It gives you a little bit of a strum pattern. Now the pattern is slightly different than that in the jam track, but you'll see that. I've also got the slow walkthrough video that you can follow along with and learn how to play that. But that's a great way to practice putting these different chord shapes into play. The other thing, once you get comfortable with that, is start now in the middle. Start in this position. Not in the middle, but start at the second position, the A position. So you don't always have to start down here. And it'll start to sink in as you do this a few times. You'll start to see these different C chord shapes. All right, so now let's take all that information and apply it to an F chord. So I know that's how most of us think of an F chord, down in first position. Well, what chord shape is that? You should know that by now. You can look at these 3 fingers and tell me what that is. That's an E chord shape. So if we were to play the F chord now all over the neck, what comes after E? D. Well, remember there was the bottom part of the D and the top, so we took these 2 fingers, we put our bar there. There's the bottom part of the D. D chord shape, not a D chord. This is the D chord shape. So we have an F, and then we have the top part of that D chord shape, an F chord. So now look at that. Now from here, this is the one I wasn't able to cover because I ran out of room. But now we have that C chord shape. So now CAGED, after the D, we start over again. So we go back to C. So all you're doing for that, actually the C and the D chord shape look very similar. We're just going to bar the first 3 strings here on the 5th fret. My middle finger goes down on the 6th fret, 2nd string. My ring finger goes down on the 7th fret, 4th string. And then my pinky, if you want to use your pinky, that's optional, but that would go down on the 8th fret, 5th string. And you can see the chord shape that I'm making there. It's the C chord shape. Same shape, we're just making it up here. I'm barring where the nut would be to simulate that. Now the more practical way to use that is just to play those middle 4 strings. And I just think about barring there and adding those 2 fingers. That's your Keith Richards hammer-on that I'm always talking about. But that is your C chord shape. So now, but it's an F chord. It's just the C chord shape. So now we have our F chord, there's the D, there's the C. And remember, where that pinky is, that's your anchor point. Remember when we started with a C? That was our anchor point. Well, now our anchor point is here where the pinky is. So I'm just going to put my index finger there, and I'm going to play the A chord shape. There's your C chord up, or sorry, your F chord up here, using the A chord shape. Remember, we have the top part of the A. All right, so we're using that E chord shape, D, top part of the D, C, A, top part of the A. Remember what's after A is G. The bottom part of the G the top part of the G. And look at that. My pinky's up here, a full octave from where I started. And now I'm able to go back. So you can see it's that same system now. So you can take any chord and then any of those chord shapes and you can work your way up from there. So if I said play a D chord, but if I started with that chord shape, which is the A chord shape, there's the G bottom part, G top part, E, and so forth. All right, so hopefully that's been helpful in a more practical way of looking at the CAGED system and how you can start to use it right away in your playing. Now, if you're a premium member, you're going to want to go on now to the slow walkthrough videos and go through those 3 levels. Start with level 1 and watch the slow walkthrough, get the notes down, and then play along with the jam track. Try playing along with the jam track that's just got that single chord. Then you go on to level 2 that's got 3 chords, and then level 3 has the 3 chords with the fill licks. So a lot of information, a lot of stuff that you can practice, but by the end of this, if you go through all of that, you're going to have a very good understanding of how to play all over the neck.